Hey guys, welcome to Alienation. If you are new here, my name is Megan, and every Sunday I sit down and talk about some form of weird and not so wonderful topic that really interests me. That garage right there is apparently drilling their way to the core of the earth, so if you can hear that in this episode, I am so sorry. It is really frustrating. Today I'm going to be talking about the black-eyed peas. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to be talking about the black-eyed children. If you've never heard of this before, it is a very weird subject. I honestly can't remember the first time I'd ever heard of the black-eyed children. I just remember being instantly freaked out by the idea of these things. I'm really not a fan of children in the slightest. I'm not maternal. Kids freak me out. So that's a great start for me in the first place. So for these things to be black-eyed and appear as children, it's just really weird. It's really freaky. But at the same time, this topic really does fascinate me. I find them so interesting. So I'm just going to very quickly run through what these creatures are. And I've also found quite a few stories of people's experiences with the black-eyed children that I will be reading out in a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, the black-eyed children are basically paranormal creatures that resemble children, hence the name black-eyed children. We need to have like a count of how many times I say black-eyed children in this episode, but they're supposedly an American legend or myth. But unlike most legends and myths, they haven't been around for that long. These creatures usually appear to be between the ages of 6 and 16, but sometimes they can be a little bit older. I don't think they'd be much older than the 16 mark, but they can a lot of the times appear younger than 6 years old. So normally there is at least 2 of them that do appear. It is a lot rarer to hear the stories where there is only 1 of them to appear, but I will be talking about one of those stories in a short while. But there's sometimes even up to groups of 4 of these children appearing. So usually these children have a very pale skin, not malnourished, but a bit like me. We are on the very pale side. And their most noticeable feature is that their eyes are fully black, so no white in them, no colour in them, fully black demonic style eyes. In a lot of the accounts, these children appear to be wearing clothes that are either a little bit outdated or even wrong for the season. They always seem to speak very strangely as well, so as if the language they are speaking isn't their native tongue or their native language, or sometimes they would even speak like they're from another time. They are always very demanding, very pushy. They usually are after something and they will constantly push for that thing that they want. So the black-eyed children are mostly reported to be seen hitchhiking, usually on a deserted or more quiet road. And a lot of the time they are encountered on people's doorsteps or at their front door to their home. And like I said, they tend to always want something, and almost every time it is basically asking to enter your home, enter your car, enter whatever property or whatever thing you can be in and you own, if that makes sense. They are always requesting entrance into that. They also appear and disappear without any form of explanation. One minute they'll be there and then the next minute they'll just be gone, which adds to the complete spooky factor of these things. This is not something I would want to encounter, especially knowing like they're not meant to be innocent children. There is something a lot darker to them. So a lot of the time they often exhibit psychic powers as well. So not necessarily reading your thoughts down to a T, but sometimes guessing what you are going to do next, or telling a person some form of detail that not many people know. And on top of that, their presence is also known to affect electronical devices, causing static on the TV, phone lines not working, that sort of thing. They also have a weird aura that disturbs people's animals, so their pets. They are known to really trigger dogs. Some of them get really aggressive and really protective of the household. A lot of the times they cower away in the corner. And I don't know if you are aware of this, but if you are into the whole paranormal supernatural thing, that sort of stuff does really affect animals. Animals are known to be able to sense this sort of thing, so it would make sense that your pets would freak the fuck out if they came across these things. So there has been a huge amount of reports of people encountering these black-eyed children, but unfortunately there is no solid evidence. Along with most ghost stories or unusual happenings, there isn't any solid proof. It is usually just word of mouth, people's own stories and people's own encounters. People have claimed to have captured some black-eyed children on camera. I have looked into it. Again, I don't know how legit this sort of stuff is. Feel free to have a quick YouTube or have a quick Google. These sort of things are very easy to edit. But like I said, there isn't any solid 100% proof or fact to these creatures existing. So apart from people's stories, where have these stories come from? Where have the black-eyed children been mentioned? It has to have come from somewhere, surely. So the press, the tabloids and media, they all claim that the black-eyed children and the stories of them have existed since the 1980s. So obviously, bit back in the day now, but at the same time, compared to some myths and legends that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, it is quite a new legend. So one of the main sort of stories, one of the main people who have mentioned the Black-Eyed Children is actually a reporter, and his name is Brian Bethel. I believe he's from Texas, but in 1996, he created and wrote this ghost-related mailing list. So this apparently had 2 alleged encounters that he had experienced with Black-Eyed Children. So he claimed he'd come across 2 children while in Texas, and he'd also claimed that another person had a completely different experience. So obviously experience with the Black-Eyed Children, but not linked to his at all, and this was in Oregon. You can obviously go ahead and read his story online. I'm not going to read it today, but in a nutshell, he's in his car. I think he's writing out a check or writing out something, and 2 kids basically come along and they're like, let us in your car, and they have black eyes. It all just feels very strange, but yeah, feel free to go and read his own version of this story. But that is one of the first written encounters that we can find of the Black-Eyed Children, and Brian still believes and does still claim to this day that those encounters and that those stories are real and that Black-Eyed Children are a thing. There has been a few horror stories also written about Black-Eyed Children. I believe there was one called The Black-Eyed Kids in 2012 or maybe 2011, I'm not too sure. And in 2013 there was a show called Weekly Strange that also featured stories about the Black-Eyed Children. So both this film and this TV show really did help spread the word about Black-Eyed Children. So the legend was spread all over the internet and it became sort of like an internet sensation. And then jumping forward again in 2014, here in the UK, a tabloid ran 3 separate stories. They were all front page news about apparent sightings and encounters of the Black-Eyed Children. So again, there was no solid proof, no solid fact. They were just a bunch of people's stories. I'm not saying they're not true. I'm also not saying they are true, but there is, again, no solid fact to it. So one of these apparent UK famous encounters or experiences took place in the countryside, specifically Staffordshire's Cannock Chase, which is a really beautiful area. And this happened back in the 1980s. So an 18-year-old girl and her friends at the time were all hanging around like you do as a teenager. You know, you just go and chill with your friends like you do in the local park or whatever. They were all out chilling, and it wasn't quite night yet, but it was on its way. And out of nowhere, they heard a child frantically screaming for help. So all the teenagers obviously panicked. You hear a kid crying, automatically you are gonna go and see what's up and you're gonna go and try and help. So they were heading towards where the screams were coming from, and they came across a sort of dirt track or a dirt path, so kind of like a countryside road. And they were able to find the little girl. They managed to see her, and she was running in the opposite direction from where they were coming from. So the main girl, the one I mentioned, the 18-year-old, she was able to catch up with the young girl, and the kid basically stopped dead in her tracks, turned around and faced the girl. She looked her straight in the eyes, but in a matter of seconds the kid basically took off running into the woodland area surrounding, and she just ran completely out of sight. And when the 18-year-old girl was able to gather her thoughts, because it all happened so quickly, she just remembered that the child's eyes were completely black. So even though that obviously freaked her out, there was a child running around screaming for help in the middle of nowhere by herself, so they obviously called the police and reported it. So the police came down and a search began, but no one could find the little girl anywhere. So the whole group of friends had seen this little girl. She had been very close to her. I don't know whether or not if she physically touched her, that sounds really weird, but they all saw her in person and they had no reason to think it was anything other than a real person. So when you're trying to help a young child, you don't automatically think that is a supernatural creature, but it was all just very, very strange, and the girl was never found. However, 30 years later, a woman experienced something very similar, and it was all within the woodland area of Cannock Chase as well. I believe the woman was with her daughter, but I could be mistaken, but she was basically on a walk in Birches Valley when she heard the same thing. She heard a child screaming for help, and she said, quote, "We instantly started running towards the noise. We couldn't find the child anywhere and so stopped to catch our breath. That's when I turned around and I saw a girl stood behind me, no more than 10 years old, with her hands covering her eyes as if she was playing a game of hide and seek," unquote. That fucking terrifies me. I can just picture that exact situation. Running towards screams and a terrifying sound to not see anything, turn around and a little child just being stood there like this, like, oh my god, that is just nightmare fuel right there. That I'm gonna have nightmares about this tonight. So she then said, quote, "I asked if she was okay and if she had been the one screaming. She then lowered her arms by her side and opened her eyes. That's when I saw they were completely black. No iris, no whites of the eyes, nothing. They were all completely black. I instantly jumped back in shock and grabbed my daughter, and when I looked again, the girl was gone. It was so strange, unquote. That is just so freaky. This case is a little bit rarer because usually black-eyed children do tend to just come and go whenever they want. It's never a specific repeated location unless they are constantly trying to target the same person and then eventually give up. They usually don't haunt, I say in air quotations, the same thing. So whether or not this is just a specific haunting of a creepy, weird child ghost, I don't know, or whether or not it is a black-eyed child case, I'm not too sure, but regardless, it is very, very spooky. Oh God, if I ever encounter that, I think automatically I just want to punch it. It's just so gross. So what do people believe the black-eyed children are? I'm not too sure what I personally believe, but most people, like I said, do believe that they are some form of supernatural creature. A lot of people believe that they could be an alien or an extraterrestrial of some sort. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. There are a huge amount of reports, I say in air quotations again, of different types of aliens. So they could just be a specific type of alien trying to get access to your house, potentially get access to you to learn more. I have no idea. A lot of people believe they are vampires. They're super pale. Vampires are supposed to be pale, so I don't really know, but people believe they could be vampires. A lot of people believe they are ghosts, which I suppose would make sense, but at the same time, they're very powerful ghosts if they are able to knock on doors and things like that. I'm not too sure. But the kids are very good at disappearing, like you've just heard. They just sort of vanish into thin air, and each one of those things are known to be able to do that, I guess. A lot of people believe that they are the children of the devil due to their black eyes. That just reminds me of the TV show Supernatural. I love that show. So most of the stories that I've read basically say that the children are either stranded on the side of a road, mostly like a deserted, quiet one, not like a busy high street, or they'll just appear at your door late at night, asking to come in to sort of use your phone, or they'll say, I'm lost, we've lost our mum, can we please come and use your phone? Or Mr, my brother needs to use the toilet, can we please come in? So as they do appear to be children, they obviously appear to be a lot more vulnerable. People's parenting instincts straight away kick in, and you want to help them, you want to protect them. Not me though, I'd be like, get the fuck away from my house. So like I said, most of the time there does appear to be two of them. One is usually slightly older than the other, no preference to whether or not they're male or female, and most of the time they do conceal part of their face, so they'll either be looking down at the ground or they'll have hair covering their face. They don't always straight away fully reveal their black eyes. So I'm going to be reading some of the encounters that I managed to find. A lot of them I did find on Reddit or just online. I have no idea if they're any good or if they're true, because like I said, they're just people's encounters, so we're just going to read them and hope that they're good. But that is the thing with people's stories, I'm afraid. They can be twisted or warped by whatever that person believes they saw. Just for example, a lot of these stories do tend to happen at night, and obviously they see these dark-eyed children. It might just be because it's dark, we have no idea, and it could be mistaken for a black-eyed child, but either way, we're going to read them as if they are real. I will mention the username, and I have popped all the links in the description if you want to go and read them yourself or support the people who have written these, because I don't want to be claiming any of this material as my own. I didn't write any of this. These are not my encounters. I just want to quickly say that, but here we go. But this one was posted in the Black-Eyed Kids Stories subreddit. I think it's a subreddit. I'm not really good with Reddit, but I think it's a subreddit, and this was posted by the user ST Luxius. It says, I have spent decades in the military intelligence community, so I don't want to put out too much information about myself on a public forum. However, I'm curious if any other experiences overlap my own. We lived off base in this rundown community that looks like any other rundown community you find anywhere else next to a military installation. The apartment complex itself was nice by the standards of the rest of the buildings in our area. At 0030, so half midnight, on a Friday morning, I was woken up by a series of knocks on my heavy wooden door. I have a rule. One series of knocks is just people messing with the neighbours, but if they really need something, they'll knock twice. Yep, there came the second series of knocks. I expected it to be someone from work trying to get a hold of me, and my cell phone had died. It had happened before. I opened the door and stared down at this kid that I estimate to have been 6 years old. There was so much about the kid that was bizarre. The eyes feature suggested in BEKs seems kind of trivial. So obviously black-eyed kids. I can't say with 100% confidence that his eyes were all black orbs. I just don't know because the rest of him was such a mess. When I look at people, I don't know, I have a habit of avoiding eye contact. The rest of his description is as follows. Clothing: grey filthy hoodie sweatshirt with the hood halfway with matching sweatpants. Shoes: unremarkable. Skin complexion, for lack of a better phrase, I would say that he was extremely pale. Not clear if there was blemishes in a way of freckles on his skin or if he was just really dirty. Hair, possible reddish brown, messy, dirty, short. His face was in this grimace of hatred. His expression was like someone who was sucking on the world's most sour candies. Here's the worst part of it. The body odour he was radiating was like something I had never smelt before or since. I've smelled decomposing bodies in war. The closest smell I can relate to was in Ranger School. In Ranger School, due to the lack of food and rest, often guys' bodies will start to consume muscle for energy. Combined with the lack of bathroom opportunities, this creates an odour that is hard to top. This kid smelled like weaponised foulness. It then says, I asked, can I help you? In a flat, void and inflection, he said, my parents don't like you. I responded, what? He stated, you'll be okay if you give us something great. I would have closed the door at that point. Oh, he does, sorry. I slammed the door on him because I thought he was just screwing with me. He let out this, no! I could hear him on the other side throwing a tantrum, like you see toddlers in the store when their parents won't let them have something. Definitely a very strange thing to do at midnight. However, kids running around the dilapidated neighbourhood unsupervised was a pretty common occurrence. I just chalked it up to bad parenting. I showered and threw my clothes out because I didn't want that stench on me. I went back to bed because I had to be up again in 4 hours. The strange thing is that the stench didn't seem to linger. I saw this kid on 3 other occasions. The second time I was going out to my car in the morning and he was standing in the parking lot glaring at me. When I came home, he was staring at me standing in the same spot. Then when I looked out the window hours later, he was still in the same spot, glaring with that same sneer at nothing. I asked my wife what she made of him, and she said he wasn't bothering anything, which was pretty low bar for that neighbourhood. Kids would often run around vandalising people's vehicles and apartments. I thought about calling the authorities. However, what was I going to say? There's this weird kid. He might need help because he's weird, and he stinks. The truth is that I hated this kid. Now, I have 3 kids of my own, so I don't just out-hate other kids. However, I hated this one. I hated his smell. I hated that he existed. I felt like he was trying to target and bully me for some reason. No, I didn't want to help this kid. Also, I had these paranoid thoughts of if this kid hates me as much as I hate him, he's going to lie to the cops and tell them that I had harmed him. It could affect my security clearance. It's best to just ignore him and this will all go away. I am a huge believer in ignoring problems till they go away. So one time I saw him interacting with kids outside, so I know he wasn't a figment of my imagination. However, he didn't play with them like a normal kid. This girl would come up and grab him by the arm and he would just stand there and glare at her. There were kids running around him and he just stared at them with that grimace. My wife wanted me to share this experience that I had back in 2011. At the time, I worked in the office of a regional command, J2. I've been read into various truly bizarre government programs. However, thinking about it, I still don't know what to make of this kid. I don't know what to get out of writing this. Maybe someone knows more about this kid or has had other experiences similar. It's certainly not extraordinary like some of the other experiences people on Reddit have had. I'm not saying this kid was magical or demonic. I can't rule out that he was truly just some kind of misfortune. Maybe the right thing to do would have been to get him help. However, I just can't get past how much I hated him for no reason. Between that and the smell, my experience wasn't that bizarre. What I do know is that I'm fine with never seeing that kid again. Maybe these black-eyed kids' experiences can be explained by kids just being extra weird. See, I don't know how I feel about that one. That one doesn't sort of fit the whole pattern of a black-eyed children story. Well, it does because the kid knocked on his door in the middle of the night asking for help or whatever, or asking for something. But at the same time, he then repeatedly saw the kid. He saw it interacting with other kids. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that one. It is unusual. Whether or not it is a black-eyed child, I'm not too sure. So the next one, this is by Pixie Des 123, and this was posted in the No Sleep subreddit, and this is Beware the Black-Eyed Children. I'm currently writing this on my laptop, and I honestly don't know what happened or if it will happen again. This happened, I want to say, around a week ago or so. It started out as an unusual Sunday morning when I woke up to realise my fiancé wasn't there. Where could he have gone? Normally, as I awoke, he was right next to me, sometimes in the living room eating cereal or working on a project, but that was only rarely. I got up and checked all around the house, calling his name several times before giving up. Suddenly I felt panicked and extremely worried about him. I tried calling his cell phone only to realise he had left it here. I peeked out the window. It seemed as if the sun had risen already, even though the clock on my phone said it was only 4:45 a.m. The sky was an unusual shade, somewhere of a mix between purple, blue and pink, but for some reason the bizarre and almost unreal colour of the sky did not faze me at all. I ran outside, not really caring that I was only in pyjama pants and a baggy t-shirt. My vision was blurry and my heart was racing fast, and all I could think about was how I needed to find him. I ran down the street calling his name and continued to do that around the whole park. not paying attention to where I was going nor what I was doing. I stumbled back down the street, my emotions finally calming and my head getting clearer and clearer by the second. The sky now looked normal, a few white fluffy clouds floating in the magnificent pool of bright blue. I stood catching my breath. So many questions were swarming in my head. What happened back there? Why did I freak out so much? Where is he? What was wrong with the sky? Still standing outside my house, dazed and confused, I grabbed my phone from out my pocket. 11:51 a.m. 7 hours, I explained in surprise. There was no way I was out there that long, I thought to myself as I walked to my house. As I was walking up the stairs, I felt a tug on my shirt. You have to let us in. You're the only one who can help, a young voice said. I turned around to see a young boy. He was quite small and he had to be around 5 or 6. But the oddest thing was his clothing. He was wearing a yellow isolation gown, like they do in some hospitals, although the yellow ones are quite rare to see. He was also wearing black sunglasses that covered his eyes, but nothing else, neither pants nor shoes. Who are you? I asked curiously, wondering exactly why this child was at my house. You gotta let us in, mister, he said more urgently in a pleading tone. I don't know you. Where are your parents? I asked, concerned about this young boy. What kind of parent would leave a child this age to wander around without supervision in Los Angeles? Suddenly, a white van pulled up the side of my house and at least 14 other 14 other children came out of it. They were all wearing the same yellow gown and glasses, and they were all from the ages 3 to 8. There was a man inside the van. He looks like a scientist, white lab coat, goggles, and a mustache. There's no time to explain. Let them in, he yelled and sped away. Everything was hectic, and in all the confusion, somehow someone opened my door, and all of the kids ran in. I followed behind, concerned and confused. Hey, this is my house. It's impolite to come in without being invited, I stated, trying to be motherly, although I was freaking out. They all circled around in my living room, giggling and chanting some strange chant. I recently googled what it was, and it was some ancient form of Czech, and it translated to, Father, 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 take us home off this place far away, oh devil, Father, devil, please. Creepy, I know. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I jumped and turned around. There was my fiancé, standing in his suit and tie, black hair swept across his face. Oh, thank God, there you are. Where have you been? I asked, hugging him tightly. Oh, you must have forgotten. I had work today, he smiled. I don't know where all these kids came from. They just showed up in this van and came in without my permission, and it's all just been so confusing today, I said in frustration. What kids? He asked in confusion, furrowing his eyebrows. I turned around to the living room where the kids were just seconds before. They had all disappeared. After this scenario, I had been having countless nightmares, and I had been waking up with strange marks on my body. I never remember the nightmares, only the very last part, which is only a few words like he knows or help us, but last night said beware the children with the black eyes. Okay. That one was very far-fetched, I guess. I think if it was like 1 or 2 kids, I'd probably believe that a little bit more. I'm not saying I don't believe her. I just think to end up with that amount of kids in your room and the whole wacky scientist guy, that to me does sound more like a fiction story. I apologise, but you never know. It could have happened. We don't know. But moving on, the next one was written by written_energy09 on the No Sleep subreddit. So it says, don't let them in. I'm 26 with a husband and 2 kids. My husband's name is Jack and I have a 6-year-old son, James, and a 3-year-old daughter named Danielle. We live a normal life with not many strange things to talk about. My son gets straight A's and recently was named Student of the Year for his 1st grade class. You could say our family is about as ordinary as it gets. Living in Denver, Colorado is nice, but sometimes I wish we could afford to move to get our kids a better future. About 2 weeks ago, I was tucking in the little ones. I just finished reading their bedtime stories to them when I heard a knock at the door. It was only 7:45. I wasn't expecting Jack to get home until closer to 9 p.m. James peered out of his bedroom window since it was just above the front door. He looked down and then spun around. Mummy, there's 2 kids outside. I don't think we know them. He shot me an innocent but confused look. He looked back out the window, then said, Never mind, Mummy, they've left. Saying Mummy in a British accent just sounds so weird. Never mind, Mummy, they've left. I thought maybe they were just some kids pulling a prank. I finished putting James and Danielle into their beds and turned all the upstairs lights off. I headed downstairs to follow my nightly routine. I'd usually clean the dishes from dinner and watch TV until Jack got home. I'd been on the couch for about an hour watching TV and the dishes were clean and the kids were silent. Jack would be home any minute. I reached my phone and it read 9:03 p.m. As my eyes scanned my phone screen, I heard a knock at the door. Just 4 little quiet knocks. I got up and looked out of the peephole and didn't see a thing. My phone started ringing, so I ran to grab it. It was Jack. Hey babe, is everything okay? When will you be home? I asked. I'm already home, but I was a little worried. Are the kids in bed? I paused. Yeah, they've been sound asleep for a while. There was a long pause between us. Then who are the 2 kids at the front door? 3 more little knocks came from the door. I'd almost forgotten that anyone knocked. I can't say this. Mom? Ma'am, we know you're in there. We need help. We lost our mum. Jack could hear them through the phone. Don't open the door. Something is wrong. Jack, I think they need help. No. They've been there since before I pulled into the driveway 5 minutes ago. They haven't once looked away from the door. If they needed help, they would have come to me for help at the car. I walked slowly back to the door to try and see them. I heard a quick few knocks, much harder than the last few. Miss, we can hear you. Me and my sister are very cold. Won't you help us and let us in? It was late spring. There's no way someone could gain pity for being cold. I calmly reached my face to the peephole. Do you see them now? They're right there, Jack yelled through the phone. No, I can't see them yet. 1 second. I was short, so I grabbed a kitchen chair and tried again. Let us in. The child who had been doing the talking started yelling. I looked through the peephole again. I heard Jack on the phone, but I had set it down so I couldn't understand his quiet murmurs. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 2 faces were right there. One older boy and a little girl. Both looked to be the ages of my own kids. Both of their eyes pierced through me. They were solid black. I gasped and stepped off the chair. I grabbed my phone and told Jack about their eyes. He paused and decided he couldn't help us until they left. He explained that his grandmother always warned him of the black-eyed children. You never let them in, try to ignore them, and never help them with whatever they ask for help with. They'll eventually go away, but if you invite them in... He shuddered. We don't know what happens if they come in. I wanted to run upstairs to be with my kids, but I knew I should also guard the door. I walked into the kitchen while Jack told me more about them. I began closing curtains and checking locks on the windows and the back door. Wait, they're moving. I think they're leaving. As soon as I can't see them anymore, I want you to open the door and I'm going to run in, Jack said with excitement. I said okay, as I continued closing curtains and turning locks. They're near the back of the house now. I'm going to bolt. Are you ready? I paused and asked Jack to repeat himself as he ended that sentence a second time. I turned to the window above the kitchen sink. I was in the back side of the house. 2 sets of eyes glared back at me. I dropped the phone and stood there. It was probably about 5 seconds later that I heard my husband frantically knocking at the door. The children were still as glass. They didn't budge. I spun around and ran as fast as I could to the door to let Jack in. He rushed in, slammed the door, then locked every lock and shoved the kitchen chair underneath of the knob. I went back to the kitchen and they were gone. We both ran to every window on both floors and shut the curtains. I went to my son's room and looked down outside of his window. I saw both kids staring back at me. We will get in, I heard in my ear whispered. I spun around, saw no one, then the kids were also gone. I haven't seen them since. I'm glad my husband knew not to open the door. If I had, I'm not sure you'd ever hear about it. Oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. That is so creepy. I don't know whose situation I'd rather be in. Hers in the house, like hearing the kids banging on, or him sat outside in the car and they're just like chilling a few meters away. So the next one, this is by Gunslinger1999 and it says, they are real. Last summer I heard about them. The black-eyed children were my favourite ghost story, and quite honestly, until last night I thought that's exactly what they were. Most of the stories I've read take place in remote towns across the Midwest regions of America. I live on the East Coast of America, so I figured I was safe from the phenomenon happening to me. Most of the stories, from those that don't know, involve 2 children, usually an older girl and a little boy, looking for help to get home. Sometimes the stories happen at night, sometimes early morning just before sunrise. My event happened at 1:04 a.m. It was Sunday, June the 1st. I've been watching a science fiction double feature at my neighbour's house. It was me and let's call them Zeke and Harry. His house is exactly a quarter mile away, so I had walked over expecting to have some drinks and watch the movies. We watched the Thing movies. We had no drinks and instead just cut up obnoxiously during the movie. All in all, it was a successful night up to that point. After the movie ended, Zeke kicked Harry and I out, saying that he had a Tinder date in the morning and needed to rest. Harry's house was in the middle of Zeke and my house. He offered me a cigarette and I turned him down as we chatted about some of our respective year away at university. He offered me a ride home the rest of the way, but it was a decent night, so I turned him down. What was I thinking? As I got to the end of the street to the T intersection I turned right on to get to my house, I noticed a weird vibration in the air. It was making my feelings resonate in my mouth. It was pretty unpleasant. That's when I saw the first pair. Coming out from behind the house directly ahead of me were 2 pale children. Goosebumps shot up my spine. At this point it was 1 a.m. and I was a little too creeped out, so I decided to jog the rest of the way home. The closer I got to my house, the more children I saw. They were fucking everywhere. Hundreds of them coming from every direction, always strange black eyes. All of them are crying out for help. help us, help us, help us. I ran as hard as I could to make it home. All the children were converging on me as I ran, and I had to dodge a couple of them from touching me. I struggled with my keys as I got to my door, and I could feel a small hand brushing the cloth of my shirt as I ran inside and slammed the door behind me. Ugh. I expected my parents and brothers to come out and see what the commotion was, but no one did. I ran upstairs to wake them, but I couldn't find anyone. I ran to my room, which was in the basement, glancing back outside to see a horde of children just staring at my house. Ooh. Once I got to my room, I tried using my phone and laptop, but neither could connect to any network or got any sort of signal. I sat with my favourite knife, and I guess at some point I fell asleep. I was awoken by my dad, who needed some help with yard work. He says he was asleep in bed with my mum all night and has told me several times to stop making up stories. I fear for tonight. Again, when there's that many of them, I just don't believe it as much. I know that sounds horrible. If that happened to this person, then I'm so sorry. That must have been terrifying. And he said that like the little hand sort of grabbed his shirt. That made me just feel a bit sick. The next one, this is from the subreddit Ghost Stories, and it's written by swamp_puppy. It says, Black-eyed kid, this is not my story, but a story from a friend's great-grandfather. This story takes place during the late summer in the 1960s in Osceola, Iowa, which was a very small farming community. My friend's great-grandpa Bob owned a farm out there. He had acres of corn, wheat, potatoes, etc., but corn was his main crop. So he had a huge cornfield. It was around at 2 a.m. and his grandfather couldn't sleep, so he went outside to get some fresh air. When outside, he noticed something that looked like a child walking around in the cornfield. So Bob ran back inside and grabbed his double-barreled shotgun and woke the farmhand for backup. They combed through the cornfield in an attempt to find whatever was running around out there. After a while, they still couldn't find anything, so Bob told the farmhand to go back inside the house while he stayed on the porch to watch his cornfield. Then he looks at the gravel road between his yard and the fence line that led to the cornfield, and standing on the road was a little girl, around 6 years old or so, and she was wearing a white dress that made her look like she'd just gotten out of church. Bob thought that his mind might have been playing tricks on him, so he tried to lay down on the couch to rest, but also still stay somewhat alert. However, not even a minute after he lay down, he heard a knock on the screen door. He walked up to the main door and slightly cracked the door open. He sees a little girl and asks, "May I help you?" The little girl said, "Mister, I'm lost and I don't know where my parents are. Can I come in the house and use your telephone?" Bob felt uneasy and told her that he could get her a glass of water and he can call her parents for her if she gave him the number, but he didn't feel comfortable letting her inside. He felt something was off about the little girl. However, the little girl insisted to be the one to call and talk to them, and Bob said, "Young lady, it's 2 a.m. and I don't feel comfortable letting a stranger into the house, little girl or not." The little girl started to get agitated and said, "I'm not leaving until you let me in and use your phone." Startled, Bob told the little girl that he was going to call the police to come pick her up so they can keep her safe and find her parents. He closed the door to go to call the police, and he heard somebody punch the door like a grown man. He walked back and cracked the door open again, but when he looked, he realised that it was the little girl that had punched the door. But when he looked at her this time, she didn't have any eyes. Instead, she had pitch black orbs instead of eyes, and she said in a deep voice, "Let me in." So Bob grabbed his shotgun and pointed it at the little girl and told her no and to go away. After this, the little girl looks right into the barrel and then back up at Bob, smiled smugly at him and giggled. And then she ran back into the cornfield and disappeared. Oh, hell no. Hell to the fucking no. That's disgusting. Ugh. It just makes me feel so uncomfortable. Like, it's so creepy. But to conclude, my thoughts. I don't really know how I feel about this one. In all honesty, I wouldn't be surprised if they were real. I don't know what they are. They are like weird, demonic, supernatural creatures in my opinion. And I do believe there could be some form of solidarity to this legend. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there is quite a lot of the stories, but seems how they've not been around that long. It could also just be bullshit and an internet hoax. I'm not sure. I don't know how I feel. It creeps me out regardless. Because kids are creepy as fuck as it is though, let alone when they're demanding to come into your house and have all black eyes. I reckon that's one of those things that you would 100% be a skeptic about until you have experienced it. And then when it happens, you're like, holy fuck, this is real. But most people do believe this is just a creepypasta trend. Creepypasta is a place on Reddit where people tell like scary stories and that. And again, that wouldn't surprise me. But that is it today. So just a little bit of advice. If you ever come across a black-eyed child, do not help it. If you're driving, keep on driving. Don't stop, don't pull over, don't let them in the car. If you are home, don't let them in. Do not unlock your door, keep it closed. Hope to God they go away. So I'm going to end on this little quote that I found, and it was written by Amy Saridfield. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, and it was written on her blog, Paranormal Hauntings, and in her entry about black-eyed children, she said, quote, "Whatever it is that you believe about black-eyed children, children. If you hear 3 knocks at the door late on a cold winter's night, don't risk it. Stick on Netflix and have a biscuit. End quote. But that is everything for today's episode. You're going to have to let me know what you think about black-eyed children, or if you've ever encountered one. Let me know. I would love to hear. But thank you so much for joining me this week. If you are watching on YouTube, please give it a massive thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below and subscribe if you are not. If you are listening on podcast streaming services, thank you so much to you guys as well. Please rate, review and share. Do whatever you can to help spread the word. And I will catch you guys next week. Bye!